Liberal humanism was defeated from 1914 to 1989. In the early stages of the Second World War, Germany won almost all the battles, and it was only through the alliance between liberalism and the Soviet Union that the situation was reversed. It was only when liberalism allied with the Soviet Union that the situation was reversed. Most of the credit goes to communism, which was also the biggest beneficiary of the war. By 1970, liberal democracies were in retreat, becoming more and more like exclusive clubs for white imperialists, and socialism almost swept the world. NATO was able to hold on to its last stronghold with nuclear weapons, but in the mid-1970s, the outlook seemed to be that it would still be socialist. Later, liberalism made a comeback, and in the late 1980s and early 1990s, when the Soviet Union collapsed, liberal humanism emerged as the ultimate winner. Liberalism itself, wounded by experience and no longer proud of itself, borrowed ideas and systems from socialism and fascism, especially the promise of education, health, and welfare services for the masses. So far, there seems to be no real alternative worth considering. The greatest challenge to liberalism comes from China, but no one knows what China believes. This ideological vacuum is a place of endless hope in the face of the new technological religions. But it will take about a year or two for this religion, which believes in immortality and a virtual paradise, to gain a foothold. The fundamentalists of traditional religions know too much about what they believe in, and although they are full of fervor, they do not really understand the world of the 21st century and do not pose a threat. Technology and religion are mutually dependent on each other. Technology needs to make critical decisions and point the way for religion to work. The 20th century proved that the same tools can create different societies, and without religion, the technological train cannot decide where to go. On the other hand, technology also limits the religious imagination, giving rise to new gods and new religions. Religions are unable to understand the questions asked by the public as long as they are out of touch with the realities of today's technology. Examples include the impact of artificial intelligence on the job market, the political impact of the emergence of many economically useless people, the effects of delayed aging on relationships, families, and retirement funds, the impact of customized babies, and the impact of the wealth gap on society. In a world of technological and economic turmoil, we need charts and rudders, not just anchor points. To history, the number of people alone is of little significance. History is often shaped by a small group of forward-looking innovators, not by a backward-looking mass. Whether today or in the 19th century, there have been no shortage of mystics or gurus, each claiming to have the solution to the plight of mankind. Examples include the Sudan, India, the Pope, and China's Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, but when you think of the visionaries of the 19th century, think of Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, and Vladimir Lenin. They endeavored to understand contemporary technological and economic realities. Lenin defined communism in one sentence: communism gives power to the workers' councils, plus national electrification. Communism required the centralization of information and resources at the hub, so that each could do what he needed to do, and each could get what he needed. Understanding the new technological realities and human experience, Marx and others were able to address the new problems of industrial society with cutting-edge solutions, original ideas, and ways for middlemen to profit from the opportunities. The promise of salvation through technology and scripture became the first technological religion in history. Since then, people have been defined and differentiated from each other by the way they produce. Technological and structural problems have caused even greater divisions, and in the second half of the 20th century, the mode of production became such a popular theme that people almost forgot that human beings existed. Most people accepted their basic attitude towards history and society and thought carefully about technology and production. In the 19th century, few people were as perceptive as Marx, so only a few countries were industrialized at a rapid pace, and most societies did not even know what was going on. The last progress train of the 21st century is about to leave the station. If you want to get on the train, you must understand the power of biotechnology and computer algorithms. The main products of the 21st century are the human body, brain, and mind, and there is a huge difference between those who understand and those who do not. If you get on the train, you get the power of God. If you stay where you are on the verge of extinction. Communism's failure to understand the power of biotechnology and computers is what led to its collapse. Radical Islamism has yet to accept the Industrial Revolution, and Christianity is no longer a force for innovation, such as spreading the concept of all men were created equal before God, which has changed the political structure of mankind, the social class system, and even gender relations. The idea of man as God's favorite people overturned the pyramid of power and became the basis for revolutions for generations. In addition to social and ethical reforms, Christianity has also been a catalyst for important economic and technological innovations. The Catholic Church established the most advanced administrative system in medieval Europe, pioneered the use of archival jars, catalogs, timetables, and other data processing techniques, established the first economic cooperatives and monasteries, and helped found many of Europe's leading universities. In modern times, however, the Church has moved from creation to reaction, and the Bible is no longer inspirational, but is still revered as a source of authority. Traditional religions have nothing to say about genetic engineering or artificial intelligence. Liberal humanism has won the war on religion, but it may also be sowing the seeds of defeat. Liberal ideals, promoting immortality, happiness, and incarnation, may well expose the inadequacy of the liberal humanist worldview and the mistakes of customers and voters. By the time genetic engineering and artificial intelligence fully realize their potential, the concepts of liberalism, democracy, and free market will be outdated. The three new issues reflect the traditional ideals of liberal humanism, which worships human life, emotions, and desires, and hopes for the longest life, the highest happiness and the greatest power. However, in order to realize this dream, post-humanistic technologies will be unleashed, completely subverting liberal humanism. If it is discovered that customers and voters have never had the freedom to choose, that technology can be used to calculate, design, or defeat feelings, and that the human experience has become a product that can be designed, the situation could spiral out of control. The third part, Homo sapiens loses control, has been a major theme, the time bomb in the laboratory, the great decoupling of liberalism, the ocean of consciousness, and the new religions, technological humanism and faith consciousness, and the data religion. The time bomb in the laboratory. Our future will be very different from the present, technologically oriented, highly automated, but with a touch of obscurity. Although the world is still dominated by liberal ideas, science is undermining the foundations of the liberal order. Liberalism believes in individual freedom because it believes that human beings have free will, and that free will gives meaning to the entire universe, but free will contradicts contemporary science. Modern brain scientists believe that human beings make choices because a particular genetic makeup gives rise to a certain kind of electrochemical reaction in the brain, and genetic makeup is the result of evolution and mutation. The electrochemical response that leads to action is either genetically predetermined or randomly determined, or a combination of the two, but in any case not free will. If a chain reaction of biochemical events is triggered by a stimulus, each event is determined by the previous one, and the final decision reached is certainly not free will. Judging from the current state-of-the-art technology, free will is just an empty term, purely imaginary, and does not make sense in the context of evolutionary theory. If human will were truly free, there would be no room for divine choice. Free will is not the same as human beings acting according to their own desires. What matters is whether or not we can choose what desires we want to have. Desires are sensations created by certain biochemical processes in the brain. We can only feel our own desires and act accordingly. If we accept that man has no soul and no nature called ego, it is not logical to ask how does the ego choose what it wants? Would not make sense. In fact, human desires ebb and flow in a stream of consciousness, and there is no permanent ego that is capable of possessing these desires. Can I decide not to think about anything for the next 60 seconds? If it is true that living beings have no free will, it means that they can be manipulated, even controlled, by drugs, genetic engineering, or direct stimulation of the brain. For example, scientists have experimented with robo-rats. For example, in robo-rat experiments, scientists implanted electrodes in the area of the rat's brain that governs sensation and compensation and were able to manipulate the rat remotely. Human experiments have shown that people, like rats, can be manipulated. Computer chips or electrodes implanted in the human brain can be used in the treatment of specific cases, and a non-invasive helmet device commonly used in human experiments is known as a transcranial direct current simulator, which has been used for many years to provide a non-invasive helmet device. Several studies have shown that the transcranial direct current simulator can improve cognitive performance in jobs that require prolonged periods of intense concentration, such as drone operators, air traffic controllers, and snipers, and one person who tested the effects in person was impressed by the transcranial direct current simulator when he realized that he had had an almost spiritual experience, and felt a sense of calm in his brain. If the technology to manipulate the brain matures in the future, it will have a profound impact on human society and humanity. And if it becomes widespread, it will become a purchasable commodity. The latest scientific research disproves the myth of the single self and undermines the belief in individualism. Years of life science research have concluded that humans are made up of many separate parts. The left and right side of the brain control the opposite side of the body, and there is also a division of labor between emotion and cognition. Studies of patients with split brains have shown that the left brain not only handles spoken language, but also acts as an interpreter in the brain, fabricating plausible stories with clues from various fragments, trying to make sense of our lives. All humans use similar mechanisms to make up stories. Behavioral economists have come to a similar conclusion, that there are many different, and often conflicting, inner forces at work in the human mind, pulling at different strings to make decisions. Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman's pioneering experiments tell us that there are at least two selves in the human body, the experiential self and the narrative self. The experiential self is our moment-to-moment awareness, but does not have a deep memory. The storytelling ego usually takes only the climax and the final outcome of an event to weave a story, adopting the peak-end rule, that is, remembering only the peak and the end, and then averaging them out as the value of the whole experience, which has been verified in cold water immersion of the hand, colonoscopy experiments, and labor and delivery experiences. Children's doctors and veterinarians know how to utilize the principle of the peak-end rule, allowing a child or puppy to eat dessert after the pain has subsided, erasing some of the anxiety and pain of the previous experience. The narrative ego has a pair of sharp scissors that scrutinize our experiences, trimming down some of the unpleasant moments and organizing them into a happy ending. The narrative ego cares only about the story, and finds experiences that cannot be remembered to be a waste of effort. Experience and narrative ego are not separate, but closely intertwined, as in the case of eating and true hunger, and diet control. However, most people identify with their narrative selves. We identify with our hearts and minds, trying to make sense out of our daily lives and weave a story that seems reasonable and consistent. Importantly, the feeling that there is a single self shapes the deeply problematic liberal belief that one's self is indivisible, that there is a clear and coherent voice that can provide meaning to the entire universe. Don Quixote created an imaginary world for himself, constructing the meaning of life out of lies, with the possible consequence of adhering to a delusion, and only in this way did his unfortunate mistake make sense. In politics, this is known as the "we can't sacrifice our children for nothing" syndrome. In World War I, for example, in Italy, from the Battle of the Isonzo River to the Battle of Caporetto, 700,000 soldiers died and over 1 million were wounded. However, both politicians and the public support the concept of wrong to the end is right. Clergymen have been discovering this for thousands of years, and many religious rituals and commandments have been based on it. The more pain the sacrifice causes, the more they believe that the object of the sacrifice, such as a god or a nation, actually exists. The same logic can be seen in economics. such as the construction of the Scottish Parliament building, the investment in failed subsidiaries by corporate groups, the attachment of individuals to unsatisfactory marriages, the inability to leave a dead-end job, and the saying, "You're already halfway through washing your hair." Like nations, gods, and money, the self is a fictional, imaginary story, and each person has his or her own kind of culture, but in the end, it is all just a story. Liberalism believes that one should use one's own free will to create meaning in life, and moreover, to provide meaning for the whole universe. Life science has reversed the liberal idea that human beings are merely a combination of biochemical evolutionary laws. The biochemical mechanisms of the brain are constantly creating experiences, flashes, and disappearances that are rapidly connected to each other, but instantaneous experiences do not accumulate and constitute the essence of sustainability. In the midst of this chaos, the narrator tries to find order and weave a story that never ends. Crusaders and liberals believe in delusion. The idea that the concept of the individual is a delusion is not enough to change history unless it actually affects the economy, politics, and daily life. Human beings are very good at dealing with cognitive contradictions, allowing themselves to believe one thing in the laboratory and a completely different thing in Congress or the courts. Many famous scholars have done an intellectually perfect backflip. But it is not easy to have it both ways when liberalism is challenged by solid technology that affects everyday activities and economic structures. We are on the verge of having extremely useful devices, tools, and systems that do not allow for the existence of individual free will. Concepts such as democracy, free markets, and human rights are being greatly challenged. The great decoupling of liberalism. The practical implications of new discoveries in science and technology will lead to a collapse of liberal beliefs, and to a political system that believes that 1. Humanity will lose its economic and military utility and will no longer be recognized as having much value. 2. That mankind as a whole has value, but the individual has no value. 3. The superhuman elites have value. It is hard to imagine how democracy, the free market and other liberal systems could withstand such a blow if mankind were to lose its economic and military utility. The president of Harvard University, writing from the experience of the French Revolution, argued that workers and soldiers in democracies would perform better than in dictatorships, and that increased motivation and enterprise would be of great benefit on the show floor and in the factories. The First World War granted women rights on similar grounds. In the 21st century, most human beings may no longer be militarily or economically valuable. The most advanced militaries, which rely on sophisticated technology, will be outdated, leaving critical decisions to algorithms. In the future of cyber warfare, the duration of a battle may be only a few minutes. With drones and robots fighting, most citizens can only be used as human shields. On the other hand, computerized soldiers are more likely to comply with the latest rulings of international criminal law. Are you more durable than a robot? The replacement of workers in the economy jeopardizes the important partnership between liberalism and capitalism. In the 20th century, liberalism recognized that ethics and economic growth could be achieved at the same time. In the 21st century, the value of human beings diminished as the economic status of the general public became less important. Robots and computers replaced humans in many tasks. Computers do not operate in the same way as human beings, they do not have consciousness, emotions, or feelings. The last half-century has seen tremendous advances in computer intelligence, but computer consciousness has remained stagnant. A major revolution is on the horizon that will decouple the concepts of intelligence and consciousness, and put mankind at risk of losing economic value. Chess, driving, medical treatment, terrorist identification, and other tasks will soon be surpassed by algorithms that develop new types of unconscious intelligence and identify patterns. For millions of years, biological evolution has followed the slow path of consciousness, and non-biological computers may be headed for a different shortcut. For corporations and militaries, intelligence is necessary, but consciousness is optional. Driverless cars, for example, meet a social need. The fate of the horse after the Industrial Revolution was to be replaced. Driverless cars will win in the few areas where society really needs them, and taxi drivers are likely to be replaced. Some economists predicted that unenhanced mankind would sooner or later become totally useless, and now the storm is upon us. Stock traders are also at risk. Most financial trades are now managed by algorithms, from the hackers who tweeted fake news in 2013 and caused a stock market shock to the flash crash in New York in 2010, where the algorithms went awry and the cause was unknown. When dealing with trader lawsuits, hiring lawyers who aren't necessarily human, and polygraphs that utilize brain scans to expose lies and fraud, lawyers, judges, detectives, and police officers need to go back to school, and MindDojo is developing interactive algorithms that go beyond teaching to understand the unique strengths and weaknesses of the individual. Even doctors are not immune. Watson's supercomputer work has now shifted to diagnosing diseases, and it's like a super doctor, with a complete and up-to-date database of diseases and medications, all of a person's health-related data, and round-the-clock, year-round access to all of them. Specialists are also threatened by computerized correct diagnosis of lung cancer, processing of computed tomography and mammography. Technical problems are difficult, but they can be solved once and for all with the availability of numerous physicians at their disposal. Pharmacists have the same experience in San Francisco, and robot pharmacists can dispense prescriptions without error, far better than human beings. At the same time, Watson's ability to detect human emotions may be as accurate as its ability to detect tumors. It analyzes external signals and internal indicators, knows exactly what it is feeling, and uses the most appropriate tone and vocabulary to tell it, which means that Watson also understands warmth. Watson has no emotions of his own, but only provides the most appropriate response based on the patient's emotional state. This concept has already been applied to some service sites, such as Mattersight, Customer Service Center, software, which determines customer characteristics and selects customer service specialists. Historically, the job market has been divided into three sectors: agriculture, labor, and services. In the past, as old occupations became obsolete, new occupations always emerged, but this is not a natural law. Human beings have two basic abilities, namely, physical and cognitive. But if one thinks that unconscious algorithms will never catch up with humans, the current scientific response is that first, living things are algorithms, second, algorithms are unaffected by matter, and third, there is no reason to believe that abiotic algorithms will never be able to duplicate or surpass what biotic algorithms are able to do. As a matter of fact, what many experts call forever is no more than a year or two, as in the case of face recognition, chess, Go, and other game rules. Computer algorithms have also proved valuable in ball games, as Billy Beane, the general manager of the Oakland A's baseball team, used algorithms to identify players that human scouts overlooked or underestimated, and to build a winning team, which was so successful that other teams quickly followed suit, a sort of magic ball effect that spread. Another example is that the approval of driverless cars will soon be realized, not only because of the advancement of algorithms, but also because of the professionalization of human beings, which will make it easier to replace them. Artificial intelligence will push humans out of the market as long as the specific competencies required in a particular industry surpass those of humans. Even managers responsible for managing corporate activities may be replaced, as in the case of Uber's millions of drivers, most of whom are automatically instructed by algorithms, and in the case of the regenerative medicine venture capital firm that appointed the vital algorithm as a director. As algorithms continue to flourish, wealth and power may be concentrated in the hands of a tiny elite with powerful algorithms, creating extreme inequality. Alternatively, the algorithm itself may become the owner, a legal entity, and not have to follow the orders of any human owner. If we outperform the human capitalists, we will have to deal with an upper class of algorithms that owns the bulk of the planet's assets. And it is non-human interlocking entities such as nations and corporations that currently own the bulk of the planet's assets, whereas in the past gods could also own land. It has been argued that art is the ultimate temple, and that algorithms cannot replace artists. David Cope, Experiments in Musical Intelligence, Emmy, used computers to compose concertos, chorales, and symphonies with great success. He went one step further by teaching the robot Annie to write haiku. The Industrial Revolution created a huge urban proletariat and socialism expanded. Capitalism absorbed the essence of socialism and defeated it. In the 21st century, we may see a new and huge jobless class, a useless class with no jobs at all. 2013 Oxford University study on the future of employment investigated the likelihood of job replacement in the next 2 decades, and 47% of them are at high risk. It will be difficult to change jobs, and in another 10 years, we may have to change jobs again, and we will need to create new jobs that humans can do better than algorithms. In order not to be eliminated in the future, we need to learn throughout our lives, and most people who have never done so will not be able to do so. In the future, with the advancement of technology, society as a whole will be able to support the useless, but how to let them spend their time and live is a big question. One of the answers may be drugs, video games, and spending time in the virtual world. Life is a dream is a fatal blow to liberalism. How can such a life be sacred? Experts such as Nick Bostrom warn that superintelligence could directly destroy humanity, either for fear of a backlash or in pursuit of some unimaginable goal. Even programs that appear to have the best of intentions can have frightening results. As for the actual threats to liberalism, the system of political performance is of the view that 1. Human beings do not have much value, but technology and politics may slow down the pace, or human beings may have some hidden talents or create new jobs and believe in the value of the individual. 2. Individuals have no value, which is contrary to individualism, and the political and economic system will make most of the important decisions, depriving individuals of their authority and freedom. 3. The elite have value. Individualistic beliefs. 1. Indivisible. 2. Complete freedom. 3. Know yourself well enough to make the best choices. Life science challenges. 1. Living things are algorithms, made up of divisible parts. 2. The algorithms that make up human beings are not affected by matter and cannot be said to be completely free. 3. Non-living things and living things are algorithms, and may know themselves better. In the 21st century, technology has allowed external algorithms to hack into humanity and know themselves better than I do. Individualism will soon collapse, and authority will shift to a network of algorithms. It is customary to think of humanity as a collection of biochemical mechanisms that are constantly monitored and directed by a network of electronic algorithms. It is enough for the algorithm to know me better than I do and to make fewer mistakes. In medicine, the baseline has already been crossed, and in the future, many important decisions about the body and health will be handed over to computers, such as IBM's Watson, to decide. Examples include diabetes sensors, wearable sensors, contact lenses to analyze the composition of tears, check blood sugar levels, smart diapers, and deadline applications. The quantified self movement believes that the self is a mathematical model. Biometric data should be systematically collected and analyzed by algorithms to get to know oneself through numbers. Bedpost.com, Israel, uses algorithms to analyze bedtime. Playing chess or tennis. The pull of various systemic demands. Humanism celebrates old age, but today, too many people are old, medicine keeps them alive and prolongs their lives, and their true selves have collapsed as they age. What used to be a single voice of the inner self has collapsed into a genetic clamor, and when faced with a difficult decision, the gene parliament is consulted, as in the case of Angelina Jolie's mastectomy. Algorithms can sometimes be very helpful in making informed choices for us. In the 1993 Cyborg 2 movie, individuals fought for freedom and privacy against multinational corporations. But most of us, nowadays, may allow the state or corporations to enter the deepest recesses of our bodies to fulfill similar desires for health. Google reads emails to learn about pandemic outbreaks. Google flu trends in 2008, which issued flu alerts 10 days before the traditional public health system, and Google Baseline Study, which hopes to build a human science database and find a genetic model of a healthy and perfect human being. It is paired with Google Fit to collect bioinformation flow and provide baseline study applications. 23andMe collects saliva for DNA analysis at a cost of $99. There are privacy concerns in the creation of databases. If you don't care about privacy, Google knows more about you than you do. Human beings often deceive themselves and fantasize about themselves in ways that Google can't see. We are manipulated by narrating self-invented stories, but Google does not and will not be misled. Many people would be happy to leave most of their decision-making to such a system, or at least to consult it when faced with a choice. In the past, and still today, humans have been autonomous entities, individually controlled by stories invented by the narrative self, but in the future, everyone will be part of a vast global network. Liberalism enshrines the narrative self, which makes important decisions. Although the narrative self believes in fictional and fantastical stories, it is true that there was no better alternative before, and once there is an alternative, it is unwise to give it to the narrative self when faced with a choice that it understands better than the narrative self. Democratic elections, for example, will be eliminated, no longer subject to forgetfulness, propaganda, and public relations practices, and following the law of Peking, so it would be better to authorize Google to get rid of such a fate. Databases will grow over time, statistics will become more accurate, algorithms will continue to improve, the quality of decision-making will increase, and eventually liberalism will collapse. Facebook research can accurately determine someone's personality and temperament, and if you click more than 300 likes, you may be able to predict your thoughts and expectations better than your spouse. Facebook algorithms, in some areas, know more about people than they do about themselves. On the more evil side, it has the ability to manipulate elections in the future. Personal data is a valuable resource that is given to major technology companies in exchange for free email inboxes. In the future, the algorithm may change from an oracle to an agent to a monarch. If Waze is an oracle, the next step would be for Waze to connect to driverless cars and become an agent. In the end, if it holds a lot of power and knows more than the users, it will become a monarch. Microsoft developed the Cortana agent, which may develop into a monarch that makes decisions on behalf of human beings without their knowledge. Others, such as Google Now and Apple Siri, are also moving in the same direction. Amazon is also using algorithms to study you constantly, and Kindle can collect data while users are reading. If you regenerate and install facial recognition and physiological sensors, you can read books and be read to, choose books for you, and learn more about the kind of person you are. In the end, we may come to a point where we can't disconnect from the internet, or we will die. 21st century technology may reverse the direction of the humanist revolution, making humans powerless and putting control in the hands of non-human algorithms. This is primarily the responsibility of biologists, driven by biological insights, not by information science. Judging living things to be algorithms is tantamount to tearing down the wall between the organic and the inorganic, transforming the computer revolution from a purely mechanical affair to a biological catastrophe, and transferring authority from the individual to the network of algorithms. Some people are afraid of this development, but many are happy about it. Everywhere around us, authority is shifting from the individual to the algorithmic network due to a tidal wave of everyday personal choices. If we're not careful, the result will be a 1984 police state with constant surveillance of behavior, body movement, and brain activity. Fear of nightmares repeating themselves. Human individuality is under even greater threat from the other direction, the slow disintegration of the individual from within. Corporations and governments deconstruct individuals into biochemical subsystems, sensing, monitoring, and interpreting them. People realize that the so-called indivisible individual is just a religious fantasy. In reality, the whole reality is a mixture of biochemical and electronic algorithms, with no clear boundaries and no center of its own. Liberalism faces three threats. 1. Human beings have little value. 2. Individuals have no value and are governed by external algorithms in a post-liberal world. 3. The elite have value and are composed of upgraded human beings in a new, inferior caste system dominated by algorithms and superhuman beings. Liberalism recognizes that freedom is greater than equality, but still assumes that all humans have the same value and authority. It is compassionate and recognizes that different experiences have the same value. In the future, however, inequality between the rich and the poor will worsen, and the upgraded human race may indeed have major gaps in physical and cognitive abilities, and biological differences. Medical breakthroughs in the 20th century started with the rich, but eventually benefited all of humanity, such as vaccines and antibiotics. In the 21st century, 1. Medical treatment and upgrading. From curing the patient to upgrading, medical treatment represents equality, and behind upgrading is the concept of the elite. 2. The 20th century was the era of the masses, but this era may be over. Some of the elite think that there is no need to waste resources on the useless poor. Today, there is a huge difference between the rich and the poor in the world, like the difference between a first-class and a third-class car. Once a superhuman emerges, liberal beliefs will collapse. The superhuman experience could be completely different from that of Homo sapiens. The new issues of the 21st century, with programs aimed at transcendence rather than the maintenance of basic requirements, could create a new caste of superhumans, cutting off the roots of liberalism. Chapter 10: The New Religion, Technological Humanism. The new religion emerges from technological laboratories, promising to conquer the world by offering salvation through algorithms and genes. The Silicon Valley is the birthplace of new religions, technological religions that offer happiness, peace, prosperity, and eternal life through technological assistance in the present world. The two main types are techno-humanism and data religions. Techno-humanism: technology should be utilized to create a better form of humanity in the form of God-human. The basic human characteristics should be preserved, with upgraded physical and mental abilities to combat the most complex unconscious algorithms, and humans must be actively upgraded mentally. The data religion believes that humanity should be handed over to different entities. A small change in the DNA of Homo sapiens led to a slight rewiring of the brain, creating a revolution. In the future, a few more changes to the human genome will be enough to start a second cognitive revolution, allowing gods and goddesses to reach out to currently unimaginable new horizons and become masters of entire galaxies. It is hoped that the creation of new human beings will be accomplished in a relatively peaceful manner through genetic engineering, nanotechnology, and brain-computer interfaces. The human mind will be upgraded and exposed to unknown experiences and unheard-of states of consciousness. Through trial and error, we are learning how to design and organize human states of mind without understanding their implications, and without knowing the full range of states of mind, we don't know where to aim. Human beings are like the inhabitants of an isolated island, who have just invented the first boat, sailing without a map, without a destination, but the ocean may be endless. The spectrum of consciousness. The true spectrum of light and sound is very wide, and the spectrum of mental states can be much larger than the average person realizes. The spectrum of mental states may extend infinitely, but science has only studied two small segments: first, the subnormative, patients with autism, mental disorders, and other psychiatric and psychological illnesses, and second, the Western, educated, industrialized, rich and democratic, weird, Western, educated, industrialized, rich and democratic, people. Weird, Western, educated, industrialized, rich and democratic. At the same time, all cash people are affected by modernity. In the desert, there are probably fewer hunter-gatherers than anthropologists. The gap between minds. Many pre-modern cultures believed that there was some higher form of consciousness that could be accessed through meditation, drugs, or rituals to a state of supreme tranquility, immense sensuality, and a state of boundlessness and emptiness. Modern Western culture does not believe in such metaphysical states, and deliberately sanctifies the mundane experience of the average person, with very limited knowledge of pre-modern man. Neanderthals had a larger brain capacity than Homo sapiens, and may have possessed mental states that Homo sapiens never realized, but of which we know nothing. In any other animal, there could be unimaginable human experiences. Bats, for example, live in a world of echoes, and moth echoes are judged to be food or poison. Some moths have evolved to be camouflaged and hidden, and in 1974 Thomas Nagel pointed out that the Homo sapiens mind could not comprehend the subjective world of a bat. It is difficult for us to understand the feelings of other animals, such as whales that have amazing musical experiences, hear each other hundreds of kilometers away, play songs for hours, and compose pop songs from time to time. Beyond the psychological range of all animals, there is a much larger and more exotic realm that remains to be explored. In the future, more powerful drugs, genetic engineering, electronic helmets, and brain-computer interfaces may open the way to these realms. In the 21st century, medicine is increasingly focused on upgrading the healthy rather than curing the sick, and on upgrading the mind, and technological capabilities are becoming sufficient to create new states of consciousness without a map or even a direction. The current hot field, positive psychology, has begun to study the supernormative in the last 2 decades, but science has so far been virtually ignorant of this area. Under these circumstances, we may be blindly moving forward to enhance the mental capacities required by our current economic and political systems, while ignoring and devaluing others. Over the millennia, societies have molded or reshaped the human mind according to the needs of the day. Homo sapiens originally evolved to be members of a small, intimate community. Later societies cultivated the ability to work together on a large scale and gradually ignored other skills and aptitudes. Ancient humans had a keen sense of smell, to the point of being able to detect the odor of fear, which was only useful when they were small, but gradually declined in social value in larger groups. Other senses, or the ability to notice sensory sensations at a lower level, are not as useful as they used to be, such as the sense of smell, the ability to concentrate, and the ability to dream. Fear of missing out, FOMO, is developed by using cell phones to keep up with new information. Many societies have developed the ability to control actions in dreams, known as lucid dreaming. These abilities are not as good as they used to be, making life more barren and gray, and the political and economic systems think it's worth it. In the future, when the human mind is upgraded, it may also reflect political demands and market forces. Focusing on the helmet helps the soldier on a clear task, speeds up the decision-making process, but may reduce empathy, such as in the case of a work crisis, encountering an impatient friend, unable to help. Loss of the ability to tolerate conflict and doubt. In the modern world, humans have the ability to transform the mind, but are almost completely unaware of the full spectrum of the psyche. Governments, corporations, and militaries all have their own agenda, and it is possible to upgrade the brain and lose the mind in the process. Techno-humanism may instead end up causing humans to be downgraded, less able to dream, less able to doubt, but more able to communicate and process data effectively. For millions of years, human beings have been enhanced apes, but in the future they may become enlarged ants. Techno-humanism wants to use human expectations to choose what capabilities to develop, and thus what the mind should look like. But what would happen if expectations could be reshaped and transformed? Humanism emphasizes that it is not easy to know one's own will, that there is a lot of noise when one wants to listen to one's inner voice, that sometimes one does not want to hear the real voice, or that one does not want to know oneself too well. Humanism demands bravery. Technological advances do not want to listen to the inner voice, but to control the voice. Dedicated lawyers, soldiers of guilt, dissatisfied wives, can be relieved by drugs. Humanism's advice to listen to your own voice has actually ruined many lives. Instead, the proper use of drugs has greatly improved the happiness and relationships of many people. The humanist commandment to listen to yourself is no longer self-evident. Learning to turn one's inner voice up and down requires one to give up the notion of truth or true self. As in the case of young homosexuals, who do not know their true selves, who defeat religious baptism, who are tempted to betray themselves, or who do not have true selves. It does not matter whether they obey or betray. As long as the will can be designed and remodeled, it cannot be seen as the source of meaning and authority, because it can always be made to change its opinion, no matter what the will says. Humanism believes that only human desires can give meaning to the world, but if desires can be chosen, on what basis can they be chosen? If a desire makes us uncomfortable, we can use technology to eliminate it. Humanist dramas, for example Romeo and Juliet, are often based on painful desires, and the technological solution is to eliminate love directly. Technological humanism, faced with an insoluble dilemma, believes that the human will is the most important thing, and pushes mankind to develop technologies that can control and redesign the will. Once this is realized, the previously sacred human being will become a design object. Thus, there is an even bolder techno-religion, dataism, which cuts the umbilical cord with humanism and worships data as the source of all meaning and authority. Chapter 11 Faith in Data for Eternal Life. Dataism is the belief that the value of any phenomenon or entity lies in its contribution to the processing of information, and most scientific organizations have been converted to dataism. Dataism is the result of the explosive convergence of two major scientific currents, the life sciences, which believe that life is a biochemical algorithm, and the information sciences, which believe that information processing is an electronic algorithm. Dataism states that the same laws of mathematics apply to both biochemical and electronic algorithms, thus making them one and the same. It is expected that electronic algorithms will one day be able to solve biochemical algorithms or even surpass them. For governments, corporations, and consumers, dataism provides a breakthrough in technology and a powerful new force. For scholars and intellectuals, it provides the holy grail of science over the centuries, where all scientific disciplines can be unified under a single theory, and can be analyzed by using the same basic concepts and tools, and where a common language is used, bridging the gap and allowing interdisciplinary specialists to communicate with one another in a comprehensible way. In the process, the traditional learning pyramid is completely reversed. The volume of data flow is so large that it is beyond human capacity to handle, and humans are unable to transform data into information, knowledge, and wisdom, and instead trust in big data and computer algorithms. Life science embraces dataism, which is why the small breakthroughs in information science have shaken the world and may change the nature of life. It is now scientific dogma that all living things are algorithms. Today, information processing systems are considered not only for a single organism, but also for societies such as beehives, colonies, forests, and cities. Economists are also increasingly using the concept of information processing systems, whereby the mechanism of the economy is the collection of data on desires and capabilities, which are transformed into decisions. According to this view, freedom and communism are competing for different kinds of information processing. Capitalism adopts decentralized data processing, while communism adopts centralized data processing. The stock exchange is the fastest and most inefficient information processing system ever created by mankind. Everyone is welcome to join in the fun, and it is estimated that it only takes 15 minutes of trading to determine the impact of headlines on most stock prices. All capital is centralized in the hands of the government, and one mistake is a catastrophe. Communism's centralized approach to data processing, with its claim that we all do what we need to do, and we all get what we need, was a failure in the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was a failure. In an age of accelerating technology, decentralized data processing is better than centralized data processing. The Soviet Union can produce nuclear bombs, but Apple and Wikipedia are in the United States. In the case of bread trading, it is determined by market forces and is self-correcting. Where has all the power gone? Political scientists are increasingly thinking of human political structures as information processing systems. Democracy and autocracy are dealt with in decentralized and centralized ways respectively. In the 19th and 20th centuries, politics moved faster than technology, and politicians and voters were able to stay one step ahead of the curve, regulating and controlling the course of development. In the 21st century, as the volume and speed of data flows increase, the noble institutions of the past, such as elections, political parties, and parliaments, are likely to become obsolete if they are unable to handle data efficiently. The Internet, designed without a democratic political process, may be the most frightening global security risk of all, eroding national sovereignty, ignoring borders, and destroying privacy. The government's tortoise speed, technological advancement is so rapid that it is overwhelmed by data and reacts clumsily. Artificial intelligence and advances in life sciences could revolutionize human society and economy, and even the body and mind. But the current political system is barely alert. Traditional democracies are losing their grip on events and are unable to articulate a meaningful vision for the future. Power is shifting, but voters don't know where all the power is going. Those in favor of Brexit think that the powers that be have monopolized power, and that if they win, that power will not be returned to ordinary voters. Authoritarian regimes seem equally incapable of coping with technological advances. In the 20th century, there was an ideological vision. In the 21st century, with biotechnology and supercomputers, there should theoretically be an even grander vision, but there is no longer a grander vision in politics. Technology is advancing at a rapid pace, and both parliaments and dictators are overwhelmed by data. In the 21st century, politics no longer has a grand vision, and the government is left with an administrative function that maintains the country's status quo, but does not lead it forward. Technology has the power of God. Maybe no vision is a blessing or a curse, otherwise it could cause a catastrophe. Vision is not always a bad thing, and lack of vision is not always a good thing. Nazis with a vision were defeated by communists and liberals who also had a vision. Giving power to market forces may only benefit the market, not mankind or the world. In the face of potential crises like the threat of global warming or artificial intelligence, it is possible to do nothing at all. Conspiracy theorists underestimate the complexity of the system, whereas a small number of interest groups have an advantage because of their narrow goals and focused vision. If the political, economic, and social systems involved are too complex, they cannot be manipulated. However, the power vacuum will not last long. If the traditional political structure fails, newer and more efficient institutions will emerge to replace it. The question is who will build and control these institutions? If humans can't accomplish the task, perhaps other candidates should try. From a data-oriented point of view, all of humanity is viewed as an information processing system in which each individual is a processor. Historically, the efficiency of the system has been increased in 4 ways. 1. Increasing the number, starting with the cognitive revolution, which linked large numbers of Homo sapiens into a single system, but as Homo sapiens were dispersed into different regions, it became difficult to link them up freely. 2. Increase the total number of categories. From the agricultural revolution until 5,000 years ago, the dialogue between different professions increased the dynamics and creativity of the system. 3. Increase connectivity. 5,000 years ago, the invention of writing, money, empires, and religion led to human cooperation and the beginning of a conscious imagination to build a single global network that would generate economic, technological, and social innovation. 4. Increase the freedom of circulation. The technological revolution, through exploration, conquest, and trade, has enabled the free flow of information through the global network. Democracy and the free market have prevailed because of the improvement of the global information processing system. Dataism believes that if all of humanity is a single information processing system, it will be a new, more efficient system called the Internet of Everything. As soon as the job is done, Homo sapiens will be done. Dataism began as a neutral scientific theory, but is now becoming a religion of right and wrong. The highest value of the new religion is the flow of information. If life is the flow of information, the next step is to make the flow of information in the universe wider and deeper. Dataism believes that human beings are not sacred, that Homo sapiens is not a sublime being, and that he is not the predecessor of the future gods and men, and that human beings are only a tool for the creation of the Internet of Everything. As the Internet of Everything expands, it will become like God, omnipresent and controlling everything, and human beings are destined to merge into the system. Certain religious visions, such as the Hindu concept of Brahman, Christianity's belief in saints entering heaven, and the Datists' prediction that the singularity is near echo the kingdom of heaven is near. The argument that Homo sapiens is the algorithm to be eliminated is based on the idea that the difference between humans and chickens is in the algorithm, and that if a better algorithm can be created, it will outperform humans just as humans outperform chickens. The actual commandments of data theory are: 1. Maximize information, 2. Connect everything to the system. Even the end that does not want to join is not unexpected, not only human beings, but really everything. If information does not circulate, it is no different from death, and the circulation of information is the highest good. Human beings are seldom able to come up with truly new values, and the last time they did was in the 18th century, namely, freedom, equality, fraternity, and all sorts of exciting ideals, or even earlier, such as obedience to the state and to God. Dataism is the first movement in more than 200 years to create a truly new value, and this new value is freedom of information. This new value is freedom of information. Freedom of speech is directed at human beings and protects silence. Freedom of information is not granted to human beings. The right to the free flow of information is higher than the right of human beings to own and restrict the flow of information, and may infringe upon the traditional freedom of speech of human beings. 2013 saw the first martyr, Aaron Swartz. The data cult preaches that freedom of information has many benefits. Compare this to countries like the US and Russia, where the key to creating a better world is to release data and give it to the free world. Google can detect pandemic outbreaks faster, and unmanned cars and Uber can reduce pollution and waste, but only if they give up their privacy. Some people are willing to be part of the flow of information, even if it means giving up privacy, autonomy, individuality. Humanism prizes the individual genius, but more and more artistic and scientific creations are born from the constant collaboration of everyone. Wikipedia is a collaborative effort. Individuals are increasingly becoming tiny chips in a giant system that no one really understands. Everyone is drowning in the flow of information, leading to new inventions and disruptions that are not planned, controlled, or understood by anyone, and there is an invisible hand of data mania. As the global information processing system becomes omniscient and omnipotent, being connected to the system becomes a source of meaning for all, and part of some great plan, as traditional religions assure us that God is always watching over you and cares about everything you think and feel. The data religions say that the algorithm is always watching you and cares about what you think and feel. Most people are very happy with this. The data religion says that experience has no value unless it is shared, and that you don't need to find out what it means from within yourself. What you need to do is to record your own experience, link it to the whole information flow, and let the algorithm find out the meaning of the experience, and tell us what to do with it. In the past, we used to keep a diary for ourselves, but now we have a new motto: keep recording, uploading, and sharing. We must prove to ourselves and to the system that there is value, not in simply owning the experience, but in transforming it into free-flowing data that enriches global information processing. Statism is not opposed to humanism, only to the idea that experience is intrinsically valuable. Value is measured in terms of how much data is brought to the table, not in terms of what experience is created. For the past 70,000 years, human experience has been the world's most efficient data processing algorithm, and there are indeed reasons for its esteem. But human algorithms may soon reach a tipping point where they will be replaced, or even become a burden, and IoT will soon create a huge and rapid flow of information that even upgraded human algorithms will not be able to handle, just as the automobile has retired the horse, and it's time for Homo sapiens to retire. Dataism takes a strictly functional view of the value of human experience. If more efficient algorithms with the same functionality can be developed, human experience as an algorithm will lose its value. If not only cab drivers, but also doctors, lawyers, poets, musicians, can be replaced by more powerful programs, regardless of whether or not they have conscious, subjective experience. In a science fiction movie, a supercomputer filled with aliens, an army of rebel robots, and the elimination of human rights is finally inspired by the love of a man to turn the situation around, and the datistas would consider it absurd that love is just a hormonal outburst. Dataism, by treating human experience as a data model, destroys the very nature of authority and meaning, and brings about a major religious revolution. Humanism sees God as the product of human imagination, while dataism sees human imagination as the product of biochemical algorithms. From human-centeredness to data-centeredness. It may take decades, even a century or two, for the data revolution to succeed. The Internet of Everything is sacred because it was created by human beings to fulfill human needs, and in the future the Internet of Everything may be sacred just by itself. All really important revolutions have a real impact. Data theory sees humans as biological algorithms, and all ideas are about changing behavior before changing the world. For centuries, humanism has allied itself with scientific modernity to maintain a balance between sensibility and rationality. Listening to one's inner voice follows the best algorithms that have evolved over millions of years. In the 21st century, feeling is no longer the best algorithm. We are developing better algorithms. Google, Facebook knows what it feels, and what it doesn't know, and should listen to the algorithms. Wait until the algorithm not only knows democratic voting intentions, but also analyzes them in terms of neurological reasons, and calls for listening to the algorithm. Practical datist instructions, such as knowing oneself, getting married, working, and going to war, are datistically impossible for the human brain to understand the new master algorithms. The real important algorithms today have huge development teams behind them. With the rise of machine learning and artificial neural networks, they are evolving independently, improving themselves, analyzing astronomical amounts of information, finding patterns that humans can't find, and employing strategies that humans can't think of. The first seed algorithms may have been developed by humans, but as the algorithms grow, they go their own way, to places where humans have never gone before, and where there is no way for humans to go after them. Small ripples in the flow of cosmic information. It is debatable whether life can be simplified into a flow of information, especially since it is not clear exactly how and why information is capable of generating consciousness and subjective experience. It may turn out that biology and algorithms are still different. It is also debatable whether life is really just about making decisions. Are perceptions, emotions, and thoughts important to decision-making, but are they the only ones that matter? While dataism understands the decision-making process, it may have a more skewed view of life. A critical examination of data theory is the greatest scientific challenge and the most urgent political and economic issue of the 21st century. One should ask oneself what is left out of life as an information processing and decision-making system? Is there anything that cannot be reduced to data? What might be lost when algorithms replace human intelligence? Of course, even if there is something wrong with dataism, the fact that life is not just about algorithms does not necessarily prevent dataism from taking over the world. For example, Christianity and communism are not necessarily correct, but they are still very popular and powerful. Moreover, because dataism is spreading to all disciplines, it has a bright future, and as long as the scientific paradigm is unified, it will be hard to shake it. In the beginning, it may spread by promising to fulfill humanism's aspirations, but in the future it can only be handed over to algorithms. Once the power is handed over from human beings to algorithms, humanism's grand project may be eliminated. Abandoning human-centeredness and moving towards data-centered values, human health and happiness will no longer be important. Once the IoT starts to operate, human beings will be reduced to chips, then to data, and finally dissolved and decentralized. Dataism is a threat to human beings in the same way that human beings are a threat to other animals. In the case of humans and animals, humans think they are the pinnacle of creation, while other animals are less important, and their lives and experiences are undervalued. However, once we set our own standards for what the internet can do, that is no longer important, we will be on a path to extinction, a small ripple in the flow of information in the universe. Critical issues. It is impossible to predict the future because the same technology can create very different societies. Artificial intelligence and biotechnology will certainly change the world, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there will be only one outcome. The scenarios described in this book are possibilities, not predictions. New thinking and behavior should be used to bring about change. Thoughts and actions are often limited by current ideologies and social systems. This book traces the origins of various constraints in the hope that they can be loosened a little, and that we can think more imaginatively about the future, broaden our horizons, and realize our options. The side effect of broadening one's horizons is confusion and overwhelm. As the world is changing rapidly, it has become overwhelmed with information, ideas, promises and threats. In the 21st century, attempts to block the flow of ideas and speech have instead relied on drowning people in irrelevant information. Today's power comes from knowing what to leave out. If we zoom in on the whole of life, the most important developments are: 1. All living things are algorithms, and life is a data processor. 2. Intelligence is being decoupled from consciousness. 3. Unconscious but highly intelligent algorithms may soon know more about us than we do. The key questions that arise are: 1. Are all living things really algorithms? And is life really just data processing? 2. Which is more valuable, intelligence or consciousness? 3. What will happen to society, politics, and daily life when unconscious but highly intelligent algorithms understand us better than we do? The Homo Deus, the Brief History of Tomorrow, explains how mankind has achieved domination of the earth. Human Fate examines our future. Bringing together science, history, philosophy, and a variety of disciplines, it offers a vision of the future at first glance unthinkable, but soon proving indisputable that humanity will soon lose not only its dominance, but also its true sense of meaning. And we shouldn't wait around for resistance. While our favorite sci-fi narratives have humans fighting machines in the name of freedom and individualism, the truth is that these humanist myths have long since been discarded, as outdated as cassette tapes or rain dances. This outlook may sound worrying, but change is often feared. All we can do is to keep learning and upgrading our skills, because we don't know what the world is going to look like in the future, and to expand our horizons through the different perspectives that the authors put forward, so that we will have more choices, perhaps more confusion, but a wider perspective on how to judge the world. Small ripples in the flow of cosmic information. It is debatable whether life can be simplified into a flow of information, especially since it is not clear exactly how and why information is capable of generating consciousness and subjective experience. It may turn out that biology and algorithms are still different. It is also debatable whether life is really just about making decisions. Are perceptions, emotions, and thoughts important to decision-making, but are they the only ones that matter? While Dataism understands the decision-making process, it may have a more skewed view of life. A critical examination of data theory is the greatest scientific challenge and the most urgent political and economic issue of the 21st century. One should ask oneself what is left out of life as an information processing and decision-making system? Is there anything that cannot be reduced to data? What might be lost when algorithms replace human intelligence? Of course, even if there is something wrong with Dataism, the fact that life is not just about algorithms does not necessarily prevent Dataism from taking over the world. For example, Christianity and communism are not necessarily correct, but they are still very popular and powerful. Moreover, because Dataism is spreading to all disciplines, it has a bright future, and as long as the scientific paradigm is unified, it will be hard to shake it. In the beginning, it may spread by promising to fulfill humanism's aspirations, but in the future it can only be handed over to algorithms. Once the power is handed over from human beings to algorithms, humanism's grand project may be eliminated. Abandoning human-centeredness and moving towards data-centered values, human health and happiness will no longer be important. Once the IoT starts to operate, human beings will be reduced to chips, then to data, and finally dissolved and decentralized. Dataism is a threat to human beings in the same way that human beings are a threat to other animals. In the case of humans and animals, humans think they are the pinnacle of creation, while other animals are less important, and their lives and experiences are undervalued. However, once we set our own standards for what the internet can do, that is no longer important, we will be on a path to extinction, a small ripple in the flow of information in the universe. Critical issues. It is impossible to predict the future because the same technology can create very different societies. Artificial intelligence and biotechnology will certainly change the world, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there will be only one outcome. The scenarios described in this book are possibilities, not predictions. New thinking and behavior should be used to bring about change. Thoughts and actions are often limited by current ideologies and social systems. This book traces the origins of various constraints in the hope that they can be loosened a little, and that we can think more imaginatively about the future, broaden our horizons, and realize our options. The side effect of broadening one's horizons is confusion and overwhelm. As the world is changing rapidly, it has become overwhelmed with information, ideas, promises and threats. In the 21st century, attempts to block thought and speech have instead relied on drowning people in irrelevant information. Today's power comes from knowing what to leave out. If we zoom in on the whole of life, the most important developments are: 1. All living things are algorithms, and life is processing data. 2. Intelligence is being decoupled from consciousness. 3. Unconscious but highly intelligent algorithms may soon know more about us than we do. The key questions that arise are: 1. Are all living things really algorithms? And is life really just data processing? 2. Which is more valuable, intelligence or consciousness? 3. What will happen to society, politics, and daily life when unconscious but highly intelligent algorithms know more about us than we do? The Homo Deus, the Brief History of Tomorrow, explains how mankind has achieved domination of the earth. Human Fate examines our future. Bringing together science, history, philosophy, and a variety of disciplines, it offers a vision of the future at first glance unthinkable, but soon proving indisputable that humanity will soon lose not only its dominance, but also its true sense of meaning. And we shouldn't wait around for resistance. While our favorite sci-fi narratives have humans fighting machines in the name of freedom and individualism, the truth is that these humanist myths have long since been discarded, as outdated as cassette tapes or rain dances. This outlook may sound worrying, but change is often feared. All we can do is to keep learning and upgrading our skills, because we don't know what the world is going to look like in the future, and to expand our horizons through the different perspectives that the authors put forward, so that we will have more choices, perhaps more confusion, but a wider perspective on how to judge the world.